Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski.
And the 70s was like that. I don't remember a race, in the early, like 1970 or the early 70s, that was bigger than maybe 100 people or a couple hundred people. That all of a sudden you started seeing these massive races come in. And I give credit to what Bowerman did by bringing over the linear theory and writing his book on jogging, and Shorter and Waddle in the 72 Olympics and what these guys did just started something that completely changed the whole thing. And we were fortunate to be caught up in that. That was a huge deal for me to be able to see that I was part of something that was popular, because I wasn't necessarily the most popular person in high school or anything like that. But now I felt like I was doing something that people cared about.
Just like I hope that on this podcast, we're doing something that people care about. That was a sound bite from the end of episode 1 with Ted Rupe. We'll go on now. More stories and more history in episode 2 with Ted Rupe. Enjoy. I think you've had a giant impact as a coach on many people's lives, success. Things changed in terms of equipment, strategy, nutrition from what you had as an athlete to what you were providing as a coach. And how did you learn about that stuff?
A lot of the learning came, I think, during my collegiate years. We went to extremes to do anything that would make us better. Now, I didn't even know about any performance enhancing drug. When I say that, I don't want people to think that we would do anything. We didn't. I didn't even know if it exists. In fact, I don't think it did exist when I was running in the 70s. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Mark Hunter, he kept these little safety pins that were about a half inch, and he'd even sometimes file them down because he was so weight conscious. We'd take our bib numbers.
Oh my God.
Cut outlines around the numerals. It was insane how the extremes we would take this to. In fact, I remember Mark, this was before one of the big races. I don't remember where we were at, but he was debating whether to shave or not. This will sound insane. And Mark will kill me probably, but he says, I don't know whether to shave or not because I'd like to get rid of the weight. But he says, what if I cut myself and lose a drop of blood? But that's the kind of crazy stuff is running around in your heads to try to make yourself better. So yeah, we would do anything training wise. If we thought 200-mile a week would help us, we probably would have gone out and then done that. We just wanted to be good so bad. And I think you saw that a lot of people like Jerry Lindgren, some of the stories that you hear about him, he just did some crazy things, but got some crazy, great results out of it as well. There's this evolution of things that we learned and a lot of things that we realized didn't help that we thought might help. But you try to pass that on, and experience, there's no better teacher than experience. And that's why I think it'd be hard to have a coach that probably didn't participate as a distance runner, because you just learn so much from it and how to deal with yourself. You get in the end of a long race or a marathon or something like that, you're arguing with yourself. You're having this huge inner turmoil battle that you're trying to make yourself keep going when your other half of yourself saying stop and sit down. So these are things where you learn a lot, I think, and you try to convince kids that they can become more self-aware by what they're doing with the sport.
Let's talk about the details of your coaching. Did you start out with both boys teams? Did you ever coach women? And what were your early struggles and successes?
I actually went to 4 different schools. The coach I talked about, Mr. Grant, retired after my 7th year of teaching, but I was at 3 other schools before I went. And the first 3 schools that I was at were more very football oriented schools. The high school I ended up at, we don't even have football. We're that small of a school. We don't have football. So it was a lot easier getting athletes to participate than at the other schools. And I always hated it because I felt like I was trying to get athletes to participate in, especially cross country. And the football coach was not happy that I was trying to get the, so you play that game. But we would get people out. The teams weren't that good, but I felt these guys were learning from each other. And in fact, I think my first year of teaching, I was at Garfield Heights, and it's a suburb of Cleveland. And got a guy out that he was fairly decent and he was doing good. And he got a couple other guys out. But then those are probably my favorite memories is when you see this thing where we're building a team and the kids are doing it. Yeah, I'm trying to help them, but it really comes from them. They really just do as much as they possibly can because they want to see there be a part of a team. And I think all of us look back, and that's another thing we miss besides those 15-mile runs where we could talk to a bunch of guys. Being part of a team is something that you just don't get those experiences once you're out of college or high school.
What was your experience with students going through that same transition or passage of confidence, fear? How did you, as a coach, did you deal with that? Did you address that
Yeah,
with your athlete?
that's a great question because that's probably the biggest barrier that a lot of these young kids are facing is the same thing that and I'm assuming you also faced is your lack of confidence. And you just say, no, you can do this. If you can try to convince them that they're capable of doing that, then you've made a huge victory. And that's probably one of the primary goals as a coach is to try to get the kids to realize that they are capable of doing something they've never done before, especially at that age. You're going to just maturity itself every year. They're going to get bigger, they're going to get stronger, and they're going to improve. And for them to realize that's something that they can take control of is great. You ask about women or girls. I started coaching, it was all boys. And then when I got back to my high school that I went to, Maplewood, I did coach the girls for a while. That was interesting. There's some different thought processes. I really loved it because they're just wonderful, but I don't think I probably related as well as I should have with them. And it's probably because my experiences were more go out and do more. And they were very social. And I hate to be real stereotypical, but it's just all the girls teams I had, they bonded great. They'd have their little squabbles, but they were more interested in being there for the social aspect than probably the competition.
What about your life as a coach? Teamwork, being part of a team, those relationships were important to you. What about your relationships with other coaches and colleagues? How isolated were you and how collaborative was the life of a coach?
I have always cherished the body of coaches that I would compete against. I think we shared a lot together. In fact, we would do things. I remember after the district track meet, we would schedule a workout where everybody that qualified, actually, I expect that it was after what was called our regional, where anybody that qualified for state, we do these quarters. That was usually on Memorial Day. Everybody would come in from different schools and with the coaches. Anyways,
Uh,
it was just a neat tradition that we developed. Oh, the coaches would get together, we talk about our kids. And I took some heat from parents and even some of my fellow coaches, but I cheer for kids from other teams. And they're all doing the same thing. They're going through the same. I want them to do well. And in fact, that's it, probably the thing that made my teams that we won 7 state championships at Maplewood. But one of the things that probably helped us the most was I have a brother who I trained with. He's 6 years younger than I, but he started coaching at one of our rivals, McDonald. And we went back and forth. I think there were 3 or 4 years where one of us went state and the other one was state runner up. And so we had this rivalry, but the kids would get together. The summers, both teams would get together. They trained together. And we were both, I think, so much better because of the other team. It just elevated kind of like the me and Hunter thing back in college is just having people around that were maybe a little bit better than you gets you to that level, gives you new goals and helps you strive to reach where they're at.
that's a great story. When I think back to myself and how other people we talk We have no idea what's going on the other coaches' heads of teams that don't
Right.
meet. You just think of them not so much as the enemy, but as rivals and competitive, and the relationship isn't that important. I was friends with the people I raced against in the era of dual meets. You got to know your competitors.
Right.
So it was impossible not to get to know them as people, but the coaches were a black box to most of us runners. So that's always a bridge to cross. Like you said, you're getting a bit of heat for doing that and the cheering. What about at the state level? How was Ohio as that's a lot of success to have other people facing year after year. How was the coaching across the state of Ohio organized, or what was your experience at that?
I don't know if we're unique in this, but we have a coaches association. In fact, I just was on the phone last night with the current head of the association we raced against each other in high school and we both have gone. In fact, our generation, I think, has taken on ownership of the sport to such a level that we went through racing, then we went on to coaching, and now we're going on to administrative type positions where we just care so much about keeping everything going so well. But we had a really good coaches association, and I don't think there's anybody that I would feel embarrassed or ashamed to call up at any point in time and say, "Hey, do you need help with this? Or can I get some suggestions for what I'm trying to do?" We just support each other. And there's always, every school has its own political issues and parents and so many things like that. Coaches can help each other. And I think resolve a lot of the things that are completely unrelated to the training of athletes. Every Monday night, I go out with a group of about, what is there, about 10 of us. Les Nagy, who I mentioned earlier, I don't know if you knew the name before that, but he's one of the ones that comes out. There's a bunch of us just go out. We eat every Monday night and we just talk about the good old days. We were out last night. That's when I talked to the state president of the Coach Association. That type of camaraderie is invaluable. I learned that probably mostly in college. Then keeping that, maintaining that is something that I really care a great deal about because I think all of us benefit from getting together. I think the people are most concerned about, whether it be an athlete or a coach, are the ones that isolate themselves and they don't share. They don't benefit from working with others. And I think we all know that we've been around long enough. There's a lot of benefit in working with others.
It's interesting. Of course, the traditional reputation from the book, The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, and how important the social aspect and communal growth is to you. I want to divert to your personal history about the end of your running career. How did that come to an end? And again, in your coaching, we can talk about that. The transition out of elite athlete, the transition out of competitive athlete and coach.
My running career, I was really fortunate. Nike worked with me, I think from 83 through till I was almost 40 years old. I had it like 12 and my competitive running was definitely on the decline because I was approaching 40 when I think that they cut me. And I'll tell you when they cut me is when they gave Michael Jordan that huge contract. I think that's the year I got, that's quite all right. But I did a lot of other things. I put on a camp. This is the 44th year I put on a camp. We have over 500 kids usually sign up for the camp over 2 weeks, 250 runners a week. I would do things like that. I used to do a lot of other like speaking things. So they kept me in the fold. I was running okay. What probably caused my running to end is I actually got compartment syndrome where I couldn't plan on, I'd go out anytime I would do a workout or something like that. My calves would just lock up and completely unpredictable. And I could be in a race or something like that. And you just stop. There's nothing you can do. So that probably ended it. But I was very fortunate. I had really about 20 very good years, healthy years where I didn't have any serious injury and got the chance to compete well. And that's probably what makes you better is every year, every month, every week that you can keep training, you're just building your whole day so much stronger and stronger. And that's the point that I had gotten to. Oh, this would have been, oh, geez, 93 or something like that. No, 95. I was going to go to Cherry Blossom and run the 10 miler. I'd run it the year before and I'd run a 48:23, I think, as a 39 year, maybe it was when I was 38.
Wow.
I ran a really good time. I finished, I think, in the top 10 that year. And I said, okay, I'm going to try to go. Barry Brown had the Masters US record. And these are things, I was proud of myself for going for goals like this, even though I probably would never announce to anybody I was going to try to do it. But his record was 49:50, I think, or something like that for the US Masters road record. So I went back to Cherry Blossom that year. Oh, it was terrible. I think I ran 51 minutes or something like that. But it was, in fact, I'm racing the lead woman in. We're going back and forth, and they got all these TV cameras. I don't want to be on TV. I finally got a little bit ahead of her, but it was just, that was, I think, my last race pretty much. Everything went bad from then on. But that's usually, I think, what destroys a running career. Either you just become too busy with other things such as family or an injury. And that's, mine was pretty much an injury. Coaching, I'm going to say I'm happy the way I got out of coaching. I spent a lot of time coaching and I was getting a little frustrated and unable to handle or understand youth the way that I think. I just didn't have the patience, and I would become frustrated. But it was, I liked the way the Beatles broke up. Did that. I went out on top. In fact, the next 2 years, I think the guy that replaced me won state championships. So I didn't leave when we had a bad team. We had some very good people, but it was time for me to go. And I think the kids could see it also. I just was not being, I mean, I couldn't run with them. It's so hard when you say, okay, go out and run this. You don't know what they're doing out there. When I was able to run with them, I felt like much more in control. And I'm not a person that likes to not be in control of things.
I want to talk about your broad perspective over the change. We've seen the sport change. We've seen the psyche of American athletics change because of the decades you passed through. We've seen the culture of youth change. You've mentioned all these things, so we don't have to say what changed. What do you think about the future? What do you think the sport will be like? And there's lots of controversies now. There's transgender runners. There's the doping issues where the science of detection is battling the science of drugs. What do you think about all that, both for youth and for the sport in general?
It makes me a little sad because there's not a more pure sport than running. We just grabbed those shoes, Chuck Taylors or whatever we had, and went out and did it. There shouldn't be anything complicated about it. But all of a sudden, there's issues such as what you mentioned that have made it more complicated. It's just going to be difficult for them to sort through. And it's too bad. We just can't rely on people to keep the sport pure and basic and forget all of the enhancements or anything that might give you an unfair advantage, because just saying, okay, we're going to go from this point to that point and see who gets there first is just about as pure a sport as you can possibly come up with. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I don't think that we're going to be any worse off than any other sport. In fact, I'd like to think that we'll be better off because I think that simplicity will ultimately reign in our sport, that they'll just say, no, we're not going to allow this. We're not going to allow that. And just keep it as basic as possible. Where other sports may not have that luxury because there's other things that have changed so much, and when you have other equipment and so on.
Technology, yeah. There is a technology impact on racing, right?
Yeah, you absolutely right. And in fact, we were joking that we need to have a couple levels of asterisks on records before there was all weather tracks. Those guys, you look back in the 64 Olympics when you had Bob Schul and what he ran in that day, it is just cinders flying all over. And then Billy Mills, those guys went in the 5,000 and the 10,000. I'd love to hear Frank Shorter say what his inspiration was in running. Those guys may have been his inspiration, and maybe they started the running and boom, even though I give credit to Shorter and those guys from the early 70s. But those cinder tracks were tough. That's what I think we started on. And so that would be one. And now the shoes. I don't think people can question anymore that there's certainly an advantage from what they're doing with the fiber plates. I don't know where it's going to end up at.
I want to mention some names of people that I've talked to so that people can see where you've related. I think there'll be some people in Western Pennsylvania that ran just for the period and got out that may not be familiar with you. But you mentioned Edinburgh. Do you have any stories? Let's bring up some names and see what you have to say on them or what you thought of them. Kevin Foley,
Yeah.
Edinburgh.
Kevin is a Northeast Ohio guy. I think he went to East Lake North High School. That's on the east side of Cleveland. We raced some in high school, but we raced a fair amount in college. The Edinburgh guys came over often, and we got a chance to race them. Then after college, Kevin and I raced each other in open races. In fact, we started a running group called Team Ohio. It was quite competitive for a while there, and Kevin and I were both founding members of that. What a character. Great guy. Great guy. Kevin's a 2:16 marathoner. I remember they started those racing series. Remember, this would be the late 70s, maybe 80, but there was no prize money. This was just when they were starting to allow prize money. We were all going, if there was a prize money race, everybody was there because and that's how you could rationalize keeping running when you have a family and everything. I'm out earning money, even though it was like $50 or something like that. But I remember Kevin Foley and it was one of the beer companies had a series of races. I can't remember which one, but we were going, Rick Rojas came in. He won the thing. It was in Bedford, a suburb of Cleveland. Can't remember who's second, but Kevin and I were racing for the last prize money position. And we went back and forth. I think he outleaned me, but it was just, those are the races you remember. Then of course, what you do, you're going crazy competitive. And then after the race is over, okay, let's go cool down together. We talk about, okay, I thought I had you here. I thought I had just the fun times that we would have together. And he became quite the great coach. He's been very involved with the sport for a long period of time. A lot of respect for what Kevin's done for the sport.
I think I got a data point on you. Lifetime earnings, $1,600. Does that sound about right?
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Actually, yeah. There must have been some under the table money there, but we won't discuss that. Yeah. Yeah. I won Parkersburg half marathon one year. That's one of the first years that they gave prize money. I got $1,000 for that. I think I had a few $1,000 paydays, but they must not have kept. I think some of the races didn't turn in their, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah. The IRS isn't going back.
Right. Yeah. I want to tell you one on Jeff Foster, though. This was one of my early years at Cleveland State, and I wasn't really that good. I think my sophomore year, and Edinburgh came over to Forest Hills Park, which was the east side of Cleveland. We had a home meet. It was, I think, Cleveland State, Edinburgh. It seemed like maybe the third school was there. We had this complicated course around this park. It was just like little loops all over the place. Of course, we trained there, so we all knew it. But Foster, he had a team. I wish I could remember the teammate's name. The two of them were going to win it. And we all knew that. But Jeff just is running with me and he says, okay, where do I turn up here? And I tell him, okay, look. And then he finally says, okay, can you try to give me the last mile? And so I tried to give it to him and he says, oh, boy, I don't know if I know that. And then he says, I think I'm ready anyhow. He reaches in his jock strap, pulls out a course map, and he's reading it while we're running. And he says, okay, I got it. And then he's gone. I mean, he just left the rest of us in the dust because he figured out what the last mile was. What a character. Good guy. Good guy.
Yeah. That's a great Foster story. My gosh.
Let me tell you another story about Forest Hills Park. And this is, this gives kind of a whole transition of my time at Cleveland State. My freshman year, we run a workout and the coach would stand at the top. There's a pretty big hill there. He'd stand about 100 yards back from the top of the hill. And it was mile repeats. We'd run the 100 yards down the hill, down to the bottom of the hill, around this tree, and then back up the hill, back to the coach, and it'd be a mile. We're going to do 6 of these mile repeats. My freshman year, we go down the hill, and somebody says, hit it. And my teammates were all there. There's 6 or 8 of them. These guys are goofs. They were out for having fun. They were not competitive with it. And they said, Rupe, hit it. And I look back and, what do you mean? Here they're all laying down in the grass. The coach can't see us. We're down on the hill. And so I go, okay. So we lay there, we're just talking and everything. And they go, okay, Rupe, you go up first. And then we take off like we'd run the whole mile. We ran 100 meters out, then 100 meters back, and made the coach think we ran these mile repeat. But it's amazing. From that was my freshman year to the transition of my senior year, how the whole program evolved. That's the type of thing that you have to fight. And team leadership, because that was the team captain that said, hit it, lay down on the ground. And how important it is to have a good team leadership, because the coach can't see everything, as we know.
Were you a captain or team leader?
Yeah, I think after my freshman year, I was the captain. Yeah, things changed a bit, but not that I was necessarily the one responsible for that.
Well, just another moment in history. You mentioned your relationship with Craig Virgin, and then we had the Olympic boycott. He was caught up in that
Oh,
he probably missed his
he
prime time. Did you
yes.
talk to him at all during that period?
Yeah, that was 80, the
Yeah.
Russian Moscow Olympics. And it was a couple years later that we became closer. So I didn't, but we reflected back on that era, and he was in great shape that year, and he was all set and very convinced he would have medaled. It would have been the 10K. And he really had thoughts of maybe a high medal also. And who knows, but he was very prepared. Craig, he was intense. As we saw in the 2 World Cross Country Championships that he won, that he was capable of competing at the very highest level. So that was taken away from him. And I'd say, a little bitter about it. And I understandably,
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to and this is probably should have fit in with one of the answers you asked me earlier. My senior year in high school. Okay. This is before my state championship that I ended up winning individually. There was a meet called Malone Invitational, and it's a pretty, okay. Well,
let me just say that's the one that ended my running career.
oh, that's when you got
I
injured?
stepped in a hole there at the top of the hill, and I was going to
Radio Hill. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah. So you've been there, and the course. Anyhow, I graduated in 73. This would have been the fall of 72. It was like late September was the Malone Invitational, and I won it. And I think my team won it also. We realized that we were pretty good at that point, early in the cross country season. Go to the awards ceremony, and handing out the awards. I'm like the first guy getting called up since I won the race. Handing my award to me was Dave Waddle, who was 2 weeks off of that 800-meter race that we all watch over and over again, every time think he can't win it because he's so out of it. I shook Dave Waddle's hand that day, and I go, oh my God, this is just incredible. Because he really had just gotten back from Munich. And here he was, he's from Canton. He's handing out the awards at Malone Invitational. I still say that moment inspired me as much as anything to do everything I could that season to become good. Of course, that carried on afterwards. My point was going to be with the Craig Virgin and everything is I started a meet. So about 15 or 16 years ago, cross country meet locally that's called the Legends Meet. And we bring in people such as that every year, and they hand out awards much like Waddle did to me when I was in high school. And they hand out awards to the runners. We get about 3,000 runners come to this meet. We have had some great, last year it was Bill Rogers was in, Waddle's come in. In fact, one year we had the legends of the 60s, and it was Dave Waddle, Sammy Bear, Sid Stink from Bowling Green, that Les Nagy, and Paul Talkington. We had all 5 of them because a lot of them were Bowling Green guys. And it was just great. I just loved because they could pass that inspiration on to the kids. This year, Frank Shorter's coming in. We've got Shorter coming in. So it's been really a great thing, but I'm very much in favor of these kids learning not only the history, but hopefully becoming inspired by meeting these people and realizing these guys are just the same as us. They struggled through their youth and then they found their niche.
Let me ask you about a couple other people.
Okay.
Has the name Bill Scholl
Yeah.
ring any bells?
Yes. Where did he go to college? Malone. And there was somebody, Bob Schul, coached him. We always get the Scholl that their names were so close to the same, but I do know him somewhat. We raced against each other, but I don't know much individually about?
We're good friends.
Okay.
We've met through the Hash House Harriers. I was just with him 2 weeks ago in New Jersey, where he's lived for a long time, and he organizes races.
Well, cool.
They won the national championship as a team a year or two after you out of
Okay.
Ohio.
That must
I
have been
think.
Malone then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been Malone because they won it. He must have gone to Malone. I was thinking he was at Miami, but it must have been Malone.
He held the Philly marathon record for about 3 decades.
Really?
He ran about a 2:14,
Oh, wow.
and it held on for decades. And they changed the course, and somebody got it about 2 or 3 years ago. But, yeah, he's just a good friend.
Tell him hello for me, please.
He's quite a character. He's a pretty funny guy, and he was a beer rep salesman. He organizes races and supports veterans. He's a great
Oh,
quality man.
good for him. That's great.
You're great to talk to. You have a positive attitude. You have a great reflection on the things that have happened to you, and your impact on youth and everybody else is so wonderful to hear. But some of the people have passed on. I'm sure some of your early coaches aren't with us anymore. Are there any people that you're memorializing with your legends race? Who else were some of the legends of those early years that some of us may not have had the chance to meet from the 60s and 70s?
I was thinking when you brought the topic up, one of our top 5 runners that was on my college team passed away of cancer about a decade ago, and it hurts. And we get our age, you start to see people disappearing more and more. You just reflect back on those times together, and when we had so much life, then when it's taken away, it's a little difficult. But yeah, the ones from the 60s, I spent last year, I read Kenny Moore's book, The Men of Oregon. He has always been one of my heroes. It was just, that one hurt because we all saw him because he had Parkinson's, and we saw him slowly deteriorate. And it just shouldn't happen to him, because when I mentioned the 72 Olympics, I should have thrown his name in there immediately, because what he did was incredible with his 4th place finish. And it's people like that. And his writings, I remember picking Sports Illustrated. He made running something that people wanted to read about because he was just such a good writer. But yeah, losing him, that would hurt. It's just too bad, but that's the nature of the game. We give it all we can while we can, and hopefully hang around for as long as we can.
You've made an impact, obviously, on lots of people. Made an impact on me. You just are a great person to talk to. It's really fun to talk to you. You've made an impact on all these people you've coached, your teammates. Have you ever considered writing? Have you written any of your story?
Yeah, I really haven't. I don't know if it'd be anything of interest to people or not. Do you know the name Scott Fry by any chance? He's a Ohio runner.
I know the name. Yeah. Oh, I don't know
was-
his story.
Yeah, I think he still holds the Ohio 2-mile record. He ran an 8:49 back in 1984 or something like that. Really good guy. But anyhow, he randomly posted on Facebook one day about when he was at University of Wisconsin. He told a story about, oh my God, well, it was something crazy about them cooking this meal and mice running across the floor or something like that. And here we had Hunter and our whole team rented a house on East 33rd Street in Cleveland. Now, this is us, not Scott Fry. Scott Fry's in Madison. But I said, Scott, your house in Madison sounds just like we had this house in Cleveland that we rented. It was a 1-bedroom, a big bedroom. We had 8 of us sleeping in this bedroom. Rent was $100 a month, split 8 ways. So it was $12.50 a month for each of us to pay the rent. No shower. There was just a bathtub that took 40 minutes to fill the bathtub up so you could take a bath. We'd go out for a morning run, turn on the water, come back, and the last mile was a sprint because you wanted to get fresh bath water. So we're all trying to run back as fast as we can to see who gets in the bathtub first. And I told Scott Fry these stories. He said, that's exactly what we did at Madison, just the same type of things. But I think from that era of runners, I think we all have these stories because we were the pioneers. We're breaking ground in a sport that, trying shoes that we don't know what we're doing. We're just going on word of mouth, but we shared that information. And I think we all improved and became better because of it. But we didn't know. It's not like this was a established, okay, do this. No, we were turning over the soil to figure out what direction we wanted to head with what we were doing.
That's a perfect summary of running in the 70s from a little bit before and on through. That's
Yeah.
exactly what this podcast is about. Thanks for all your time. This has been great. You're the ideal person, I think, that was targeting. We've never met. I think it turns out we might have been on the same course at the same time at a Penn, Ohio meet in the mid 70s. It's
I'm going to
possible.
see if I can find those results because I think we may have been. What year did you run Malone? Was that in college?
I didn't even finish the race, but I
Yeah.
ran it was the fall of 77.
Okay. I may well have been in that race. So I'm going to try to find those results here and see. Very good to meet you. And thanks for the work that you do. These are the types of things that we didn't have. You owe it to the sport to, give back. And thank you for doing that. Owe it to the sport to, give back. And thank you for doing that. Talk about trying to make phone calls to get results from around the state or country. Now, something like this, giving us the ability to share information very readily. So I appreciate your work in this.
Thanks
All
for
right.
taking all your time, Ted.
No,
Great to meet
thank you.
All
All
right.
right. You have
bye-bye.
a great day.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.